Over the last 3 or 4 decades, it has become very common in America to think of the studio as a factory, as a place of production, sort of the Warhol factory, and everybody has assistants making their work and this and that. And my idea of a studio is a place that can be used to amplify the right moral choices. So I make my own paintings, and I have made the studio in such a way that everywhere I turn, I will be reminded of why I started to do art in the first place. Why was it that I made this choice? I don't want a particular trendiness or a particular market desire or whatever to dictate or rotate slowly, as it always happens, why I'm doing what I'm doing. I have set up in my studio constant reminders of what is the right path, what is the path that I admire, who are people who I admired. A place that is closer in some ways to a monastic practice. I don't look at work as production. So that's the philosophy behind everything in the studio, from the materials to the way it's designed to what I put and not put here. So I want the studio to be better than me, so it can teach me how to live and how to be an artist. Usually, when I begin a project, I do a number of writings first. Usually those writings are philosophical, or sometimes they're just reflections on life, very simple, just little notes. Some of them are more developed. And then I start painting. In the process of painting, I clarified, I make concrete what seemed to be these loose ideas. And in the process of becoming more concrete, I begin to understand what was hidden by the words or what was hidden by my understanding. And as that process begins to rotate my own awareness of the work, something new begins to emerge. I have no allegiance to anything I make from the point of view of it all matters a great deal to me, but no specific stage matters that much to me. So at any moment in time, I will wipe out something that took me months to make, and I feel no obligation to those months. I only feel obligation to the sense of where the piece wants to become. Sculpture is different than painting because painting somehow is much easier. It doesn't have the structural problems of sculpture does. Sculpture by its very nature is in your own world, in your own space. So modifying things is not as easy, especially when you have committed to, say, a very large piece, that you have a steel structure and so on. And then you feel obligated by all that history and all that expense and all that effort of everybody else. That's a false obligation. So usually I try to make sure that I feel free to destroy what I have made in sculpture. In painting, you can wipe out a painting in 3 minutes and then you regret it, but it's gone. In sculpture, you have to think about, is this really what I want to do? So I depend on both, and I depend on that activation of what a sculpture does in my own space. Paintings are all about distance. That's what paintings are. Paintings are objects of distance. Sculptures mediate that distance in a different way. So I like that interference that sculpture does to painting. trying to sort of map the questions I have about the world into this world of art. So because of that, things come in and out. A lot of the images come from memories of childhood, for things that seem to have a charge in itself. Like I have used a German Shepherd in my writings and in my paintings. I had a German Shepherd, but it's not really about the German Shepherd I had. It's about sort of this notion of protection. And I like what it is, but each German Shepherd is different because of the ways they are treated in the painting. Or sort of a ship on its side, which seems childish and awkward. And it's the awkwardness, the lack of its proper place that is more important than the ship. Or the little figure in a matador outfit, very clumsy, all looking and young at the same time. So my interest is really in his quality as a misfit. I developed this little image of a boy carrying a house. I first did it for the Cathedral St. John the Divine project. I wanted to make a reference to the difficulty of the journey of who we are, because we can, as much as we want to reinvent ourselves or whatever, we always have this history, this baggage, this connection to the past. And it seemed that the idea of carrying one's home, one place of belonging, as well as the hope of putting it somewhere someday, is very central to the human experience. And then the crutches had nothing to do with him being crippled. That idea never crossed my mind. The crutches suggest movement immediately. You only put crutches on when you want to go somewhere. Otherwise, you just lay down on the ground. So I wanted to say, in a very simple way, movement is part of the concern here. And he was called the gambler originally because he's making a gamble, a wager, by carrying this house. He can drop it at any time. He can collapse because of his weight. And then I was invited to install the same piece at the Hermitage in Russia, which is particularly interesting because this Operation Peter Pan stopped in 1962 because the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is the Russians putting their missiles in Cuba. So I find it very interesting that this little boy now journeys back to Russia and somehow closes some sort of historical loop that exists there. And it's a very interesting idea to have this boy in this trajectory of displacement to come and stand at the courtyard at the entrance to the Hermitage. So as it appears in all these different ways, rather than having some closure about this work, it seems to have opened up more things for me, more questions. Everything that I have made is always in some sort of battlefield relationship with me, with who I am today. It obligates me to something, but at the same time, it reminds me where I have been. I think this is the case not only with my work, but life itself, So my work from the past is there to remind me of where I have been. But on top of my studios, I keep the phrase, keep your actions faithful. So it's always faithful to the present. It's always faithful to what I'm thinking and what I'm saying and what I'm doing. But I think primarily my thought about art, I do it in painting. Not because it's about painting necessarily, or it's about paint, or it's about any of that, but because somehow in there I can understand why am I an artist? Why is it that I'm trying to do it? And I use that knowledge of myself as an artist to everything else I do.